Famous Hans, I just wonder why we have to go through a recession every so often to get rid of our psychology and greed that human nature has. I just can't work that out. Any one of you?
I'm willing to have a go at that. We work in a so-called free market or a capitalist system. And what happens in a market system or a capitalist system is the economy works on the basis of lots of people buying and selling goods and lots of people trying to invest to produce more goods in the future. Now, one of the problems in such a system is that if for any reason at all, firms suddenly decide to cut back on the investment, then what happens is they don't hire as many workers. Because they don't hire as many workers, the incomes of the workers go down. Because the incomes have gone down, they don't spend as much. Because they don't spend as much, someone else's job goes down the drain, and so on and so on. And my friend John Maynard Keynes, who I never knew but was a famous economist, said that investment is affected by so-called animal spirits. That is, there's no simple, clean-cut, rational logic for what determines how much a firm is going to invest. What's happened with the global financial recession is a lot of firms have said, oh, heck, the sky's falling. We're not going to invest now. We're not going to expand our firms, our plant, our equipment. We had put out orders for more equipment. We'll postpone them now. We were going to build a new model of this car, but let's leave it now because no one's going to buy the cars anyway. So they just hold back the investment for some time. And as soon as they do that, it feeds into the other people's employment and their consumption expenditures. That affects other people's wages and income, etc. Now, what causes these cycles in investment is complicated as well. People reckon that our firm's investment depends on a continuing growth. So if the growth slows down, then firms don't want to invest as much. And we in Australia were living off the Chinese backs in a sense. The Chinese economy is growing rapidly, so we were investing our resources in mining and selling them iron ore and steel, etc. The global financial crisis has also affected the Chinese. The Chinese growth has slowed down, so they don't want to buy as much of iron ore and steel, etc. from us. So our firms, the mining firms, are cutting back on the investment too. They're cutting back on the production too. And this then leads to further and further cutbacks in other people. It's a very complicated process.
Did either of you want to go on with the contradictions of capital? Or?
Very quickly, Phil. Just only thing I'd add to what Raja said is that if you stand further back than that, then you can start to see very long-term trends, sort of long waves, and those are kind of different things that go on, and they go on for the same sorts of things, but they're about big restructuring crises like the 1930s. We talk about what can we learn from the Great Depression of the 1930s. I mean, the answer is you can learn certain things, but I don't think you can learn very much because the world has turned upside down at least 3 times since the 1930s. So you do get these big long waves where technologies change, where the balance between sectors change. You know, manufacturing hasn't been the growth engine for economies like Australia. So you do get these long waves as well. And the problem is that governments, for all sorts of reasons which we haven't got time to debate now, they kind of stop-start with things. So that when you're in a recession, you know that joblessness is going to be a big problem. So there's a lot of activity. Unfortunately, when you're in a boom, and the last boom we had an idea in Australia from a lot of politicians that it wasn't the place of government to start intervening and to try and do restructuring. And I remember being at a meeting of all the mayors of councils in Western Sydney, in Greater Western Sydney, when the economy was going along very nicely. And a member of the government was there to talk about the urban and regional policy. And he basically said to those mayors, don't get your hopes up. This is not the business for the national government to be in. And the mayors were absolutely outraged that this is an opportunity when maybe you should do restructuring stuff to improve the resilience of the communities down the track when either the shorter term recessions or the long wave recessions start to hit you. But unfortunately, there's a business cycle in politics as well, and we tend not to do stuff when we possibly could have afforded to do stuff that's going to put us in a better position in the long run when we do get these recessions.
And can I just add a small postscript about the boom years? During the last decade, Bob, you were talking before about the gap. There was a significant gap that grew during those years between Australians doing well and Australians in poverty.
That's true.
And it was about 10% of the population who were classed as living in poverty during those boom years of the last decade. So, you know, you can have a perception that we were all kind of benefiting from the kind of economic sunshine, but we weren't. And it's those kind of structural things that weren't tackled at the time.
Well, the economy is regarded by most of us as a distant and unknowable machine that operates on its own terms and its own complex rules. Yet its impact, as tonight's session has reinforced, is up close and personal. I have to say, some of you who might have been here last time, my head is really starting to spin a little bit. I was really struck by Ross Gittins last time. I remember talking about the behavioural patterns that affect the economy. And listening to the discussion tonight, I found myself wondering, we talk about business confidence, we talk about confidence indicators, retail confidence. I wonder what it would take for an unemployed person to feel confident, to start feeling as if there was some sign of hope in our society. And I think that's the thought that just kept coming back to me. Bob's point about access, about what is opportunity, what do I need to be able to actually have these skills to be confident about going for that job and possibly getting it. What do I need to be able to have the wherewithal in order to find the job in my region, a job that's going to be reasonably rewarding and is going to lift me outside of the new start type of environment, which I think for any of us would have to recognise is pretty damn pathetic. So tonight for me was an extraordinarily challenging evening. Coming on top of the big picture last time we spoke, it's leaving us with a number of questions, and I think we couldn't have had three better people who brought extraordinary breadth of experience and knowledge to the question, and I think have really confronted us with some fairly demanding challenges. So again, if we could thank Clare, Raja and Bob.